1980, Moscow. A young woman hears that a department store nearby has just received a shipment of good winter boots. She leaves work, grabs her coat, runs. By the time she arrives, the line stretches around the block. She waits. 3 hours. She reaches the counter. Her size is gone. She buys a pair anyway, 2 sizes too big, because who knows when boots will come again. This wasn't a rare emergency. This was Tuesday in the Soviet Union. But here's the fascinating part. Soviet people almost always got what they needed. Not through stores, not through money, through a parallel system so clever and so deeply human that Western economists who studied it were genuinely amazed. Today, we're going deep into 4 of those methods, and I promise, by the end of this video, you will see the Soviet Union in a completely different way. To understand what Soviet people invented, you first need to understand the problem they were solving. The Soviet state controlled everything produced in the country. Every factory had a quota from Moscow: make this many refrigerators, this many shoes, this many tons of sausage. The plan was everything. The problem? The plan was often spectacularly wrong. A boot factory might produce 10,000 pairs in size 45 because that's what the quota said, while size 38 was nowhere in the country. A meat plant might fulfill 100% of its plan in weight while quietly replacing beef with cheaper filler. And there's a reason Soviets joked that the popular doctor's sausage was made of toilet paper. It wasn't, but the rumor stuck because the texture sometimes suggested it. The result was called deficit, deficit. Not poverty, scarcity by design. And money, strangely, was almost beside the point. A Soviet engineer with a full salary could stand in front of an empty shelf with a wallet full of rubles and get nothing, because the thing he wanted simply didn't exist in the store that day. So Soviet citizens built something else entirely. The first and most important method didn't have a price list. It didn't have a storefront. And it was technically not illegal, which made it impossible to stop. It was called Blat, and the closest English translation is connections, but that word is far too weak. Blat was an entire economy, a shadow civilization running underneath the official one. Here's how it worked in practice. A school friend of yours worked at the Bolshoi Theater box office. You had once helped her daughter get into university, spent time writing recommendation letters, made a few calls. Now, years later, when you want tickets to the most coveted performance of the season, you don't queue for 2 days. You call her. She puts aside 2 tickets. You come in through a side entrance. Or your neighbor worked at a food store. She knew when the fresh meat delivery was arriving on Thursday. She'd slip you a note under the door on Wednesday evening. You came in early before the shelves were technically stocked, and you left with the good cuts. In return, when your brother, who worked at a car parts factory, could get her husband to the front of a years-long waiting list for spare parts, you made sure that happened. But here's the detail that Western people always find most surprising. Offering money was often considered rude, almost offensive. If you walked up to a Soviet shop worker and tried to slip her a few rubles, she might be insulted. Because Blat wasn't a transaction, it was a relationship. It implied that you were offering to buy your way in, to skip the relationship part entirely. That was a social violation. The currency was time, attention, remembered birthdays, a bottle of cognac at New Year, and the unspoken understanding that you owed each other indefinitely in ways that would be settled later, because there was always a later. The second method was Blat's close cousin, and it explains why the most powerful person in any Soviet neighborhood was often not the party official, not the doctor, not the engineer. It was the woman behind the grocery store counter. Soviet shop workers had something that money couldn't buy: access, and they used it with extraordinary precision. The system was simple. When a delivery arrived, good sausage, fresh butter, imported chocolates, quality fabric,
The desirable items never reached the public shelf. They went under the counter, into a back room, reserved. For whom? For the people the shop worker knew. Her regular customers who treated her with genuine warmth. Neighbors who brought her flowers from the dacha. The doctor whose clinic she used. The teacher of her children. A carefully curated inner circle of mutual obligation. The writer Yelena Skliarova described it perfectly. My mother would spend 15 minutes chatting with the woman at the meat counter every single week, not because she liked her particularly, but because that woman determined whether our family had meat for Sunday dinner. And notice what this created: a world where having money was less useful than being liked. A world where kindness, attention, and social skill were literally survival tools. The Soviet Union accidentally built a society where being a good neighbor was economically rational. If you're enjoying this look inside Soviet life, subscribe right now. We go deep on these stories every week. The third method was the most dramatic and the most dangerous, and it started with a pair of jeans. In the Soviet Union, Western goods were not just fashionable, they were almost mythological. A pair of Levi's jeans, real ones with the leather patch on the back, represented something the Soviet state couldn't produce: the outside world, freedom, modernity, the forbidden. In the 1970s, a pair of Levi's jeans cost around 150 rubles on the black market. The average monthly salary was 120 to 130 rubles. People paid it anyway. By the 1980s, the price had risen to 300 rubles, more than 2 months' wages, and the waiting lists to even find a pair were measured in weeks. The people who made this possible were called Fartsovshiki, black market traders, and their story is one of the most extraordinary entrepreneurial tales of the 20th century. The phenomenon started almost by accident. In 1957, Moscow hosted the World Festival of Youth and Students, the first time tens of thousands of foreigners had ever been allowed to move relatively freely through a Soviet city. 36,000 visitors arrived from across the world. Within days, a spontaneous black market erupted. Soviet students discovered they could trade almost anything: a Soviet military watch, a fur hat, a bottle of vodka, for Western clothes, records, and chewing gum. The authorities were horrified and completely unable to stop it. After the festival, professional Fartsovshiki emerged. Their main territory? The areas around in-tourist hotels, the only hotels where foreigners were allowed to stay, heavily staffed by KGB informants. The Fartsovshiki knew this. They operated in the open air, approaching tourists with a whispered question: "Have you anything for sale?" Nothing was too small. Marlboro cigarettes, chewing gum, disposable lighters, Playboy magazines, ballpoint pens. A pack of Marlboro that cost 2 rubles could be resold for 20. Jeans went for 10 times the tourist's purchase price. The best Fartsovshiki built serious networks. They had informants among hotel doormen, chambermaids, restaurant staff, people who would tip them off when new foreign groups arrived. The risks were real. Getting caught meant prison, up to 7 years for speculation. In the most famous case, 2 Moscow Fartsovshiki named Rokotov and Faibishenko had built a currency trading empire worth millions. Khrushchev personally ordered them to be executed and changed the law retroactively to make it possible. The very thing that drives every Western economy, private enterprise, buying low and selling high, was here punishable by the ultimate sentence. And yet, people still did it, because the demand was simply too powerful to stop. The fourth method requires you to picture a train. A long, green Soviet train leaving a provincial city at midnight. Every passenger is carrying empty bags. They are heading to Moscow. Not for tourism, not for business, to buy sausage. This was the kolbasny poyezd, the sausage train, and it was so common across the Soviet Union that it became the subject of a famous joke riddle. What is it? Long, green, and smells like sausage. The answer? The overnight train from any regional city to Moscow. The Soviet distribution system was deliberately tiered. Moscow received the best food supplies in the country, by design as the showplace of socialism, Leningrad second, other large cities third, and provincial towns got whatever was left, which was often very little. So residents of Yaroslav, of Ryazan, of Voronezh, cities just 2, 3, 4 hours from Moscow, made regular trips. They'd take the night train, arrive early, queue at the meat shop, the dairy, the bakery, fill their bags, take the afternoon train home, exhausted, but with food. The sausage train ran until the very last day of the Soviet Union. Here's what strikes me most about all of this. The Soviet state spent enormous energy trying to be the sole provider of everything. It controlled production, distribution, prices, access. It built a system designed to make every citizen dependent on the state. And Soviet people, quietly, persistently, without any central organization, built a complete alternative. A shadow economy of favors, connections, back rooms, night trains that was in many ways more efficient than the official one. Economists who studied this called it the informal economy, but for the people who lived it, it had a simpler name: life. Soviet life was full of moments like this, bizarre, clever, deeply human, and we've only scratched the surface. And if you know someone who lived through this era, ask them about Blat. You'll be amazed by what you hear. See you in the next one.